cage fighting connoisseur. Oh, that Google Hangout, it gets me every time. Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid Nate from BloodyElbow.com with my patented bathrobe review of UFC 155. Man, what an incredible night. I have to say, it started out slow. The preliminary fights had a couple good fights, but a lot of slow action. I felt like the fans were restless. People I watching it with, the fights with were a little bit restless, but boy, those last three fights just picked up an inexorable momentum. And my God, that Jim Miller Joe Lozon fight, a fight of the night, fight of the year, maybe fight of the century, one of the most incredible exhibitions of mixed martial arts you're ever going to see. Just a bloodbath, a complete show of will, skill from both guys, incredible warriors. And then that heavyweight title fight between Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos. The last fight was a one-punch wonder. This fight was a 5-round deconstruction. It was brutal. Brutal, brutal, brutal. Cain Velasquez put on a career-making performance, sets up a rubber match down the road. You know an athlete like Junior Dos Santos is going to turn it around. He'll be back. I look forward to the culmination, the rubber match in this series that will definitely, I think, establish once and for all who the heavyweight of this era is. The Fedor Emelianenko era is over. We really haven't had a dominant champion since Fedor's run, and I'm looking forward to finding out, is it Cain, is it Junior Dos Santos, or maybe Alistair Overeem is going to come in and establish himself, maybe even Daniel Cormier. Regardless, as of last night, Cain Velasquez, hands down, the best heavyweight in the world, maybe one of the best heavyweights in the sport's history. Incredible showing. Those huge right hands he landed on Junior Dos Santos were just unbelievably brutal, and it's a testament to Dos Santos, his champion's heart, that the man was able to take a beating like that. Clearly not his fight. It was clear by the midway in the second round that it was not going to be Junior Dos Santos' night, and he never gave up. He hung in there. He was throwing punches, throwing elbows, trying to hurt Cain and hurting him all through the fight. It was an incredible, incredible fight. But let's go through the performance, the fight, the card from the bottom up. Start with the flyweight fight. John Moraga versus Chris Carriasso opened up the festivities on Facebook early yesterday evening. Moraga got the submission, continues his momentum in the division. I think the guy's an up-and-comer. I believe he's 3-0 in the UFC now. Pretty good fight, not a great fight. Wasn't really a barn burner. From the flyweights, I really like to see some frenetic action to start an event, and it never quite caught fire, but it was nice to see Moraga get the definitive conclusion. And this is a guy to watch. This is a guy that's going to be in the flyweight title picture. As new and as thin as that division is, these guys are pretty quickly, and expect to see Moraga in there against the winner of the Dodson-Johnson fight. Maybe not in their next fight, but one or two fights down the road. I think Moraga's got a championship run in him. I don't know that he's championship caliber, but he's definitely established that he's contender caliber. Up next, we had a featherweight fight between Max Holloway and Leonard Garcia. Holloway took the split decision, but I personally, a lot of people disagree with me on this. I thought Garcia won this fight. I think it's a little bit of karma. Garcia infamously won a couple of decisions over Chen Sung-jung, the Korean Zombie, and Nam Phan, where he clearly didn't deserve the wins. And I think the karma came back to bite him in the ass. The stats showed Garcia landed more punches, but frankly, it was a terrible fight. It was a sloppy. It wasn't even quite a slobber knocker. It was more of just a slobber. And they were winging punches, not connecting. It was just ugly and sloppy and not all that fun. It wasn't a good start. But Todd Duffy, I think, redeemed the Facebook card by just demolishing Phil DeFries. Those huge right hands he was bludgeoning the Brit with were just a thing of beauty. If you like controlled violence, and I believe we all do, that's why we're watching cage fighting. Todd Duffy, an incredible specimen of a man, and he's been out of the UFC for a couple years. He had a couple of rough years there after he lost to Mike Russo. He was booted out of the UFC for some remarks he made in public that weren't too well considered. He fought only twice in the 2 years he was out. One of those fights, just a very quick deconstruction, demolition by Alistair Overeem and Dream last year. And so it's good to see Duffy back on the winning track. And I think he's got a shot to make a mark in the heavyweight division. I don't see him as ever being championship caliber, but you never know. He's a young guy. He's very strong, very tough. He's always fun to watch. I'd love to see him fight Matt Mitrione, any number of other heavyweights the UFC has. Some good stuff, and good to have him back. Then on the preliminary FX card, Miles Jury just demolished Michael Johnson. Demolished is the wrong word. Miles Jury dominated Michael Johnson. Early on, it looked like Johnson's striking was going to be a factor and that he had an edge there. But once the fight went to the ground, Jury was just riding in the Turk, happy to sit in half guard with wrist control and just put a beating on Johnson. I felt bad for Johnson. He didn't have a lot to offer in that fight, and Jury really did well. Then we had another lightweight fight between Jamie Varner and Melvin Guillard. This was a rescheduling of the fight they were supposed to have a couple weeks ago, and Varner was struck ill in the locker room right before the fight at the Ultimate Fighter 16 finale and had to pull out. Good fight. It wasn't quite the barn burner I was hoping for. I mean, compared to the Lozon Miller fight later in the card, it's going to be completely forgotten. But nevertheless, it was a really good fight. Both guys showed a lot of skill. Varner, I was impressed that he was able to outscore Melvin on the feet. And I was impressed by Melvin's grappling. He was able to defend himself and get back on his feet, never let the fight get carried away. There were a couple times I thought Melvin was going to fall into his old pattern of getting hit, getting hurt, getting scared, freaking out, and getting tapped out. Varner hurt him a couple times, followed up to go for the submission, and Melvin defended. An excellent show of maturity and heart there on Melvin's part. But Varner, really impressive return to the UFC. He's 2-1. He demolished Edson Barboza as a short-notice replacement. Came back in, fought a great fight against Joe Lozon. Even though he lost it, it was still a great performance. And then to come in and dominate Melvin Guillard, I think you have to say that Jamie Varner is another one of these immigrants from the WEC who's going to be making an impact in the lightweight division going forward. Then we had bantamweights Eric Perez versus Byron Bloodworth. Pretty much just a one-sided beatdown of Bloodworth. Probably the kid isn't UFC caliber. Much respect. I'm sure he's a very talented guy, good guy, but his two fights in the UFC, he really hasn't looked like he belongs in the octagon, and no shame in that, man. This is the cream de la cream, and there's nothing wrong with coming short of that. Eric Perez, however, looks like he could be a contender in the UFC's bantamweight division, and they're going to love that because he's Mexican, and they are really pushing the UFC to the Mexican market. They're hoping to have an Ultimate Fighter series set in Mexico. They're thrilled to have Cain Velasquez as champion so they can market that to that huge Latin fight audience. Perez got to wear his luchador mask in the octagon for the post-fight interview. They didn't show the walk-in, so I don't know if he got to wear it. I presume he wore it in on his walk into the cage. It's nice to see the UFC letting guys show off some local color, as it were, and they also got Perez a big PR push with Sports Illustrated and Yahoo and other outlets, serious outlets, giving a guy pretty serious coverage for somebody who's a bantamweight on the undercard. So I think we'll see big things from Perez. And then one more bantamweight fight to round out the FX card, and Eddie Wineland and Brad Pickett. I had big expectations because both of those guys are veteran, proven badasses, and Wineland just had the reach on Pickett, and he blasted him. It was amazing that Pickett took the punishment he did and just kept coming. Wineland said afterwards he'd never been hit that hard ever in his life. So Pickett put on a credible performance, but he just had no solution for Wineland's reach. Wineland has the longer arms, the longer reach. Pickett wasn't able to get inside without getting beat up on the way in, and he just where were the kicks? I mean, to me, it's like if you're going to be at a reach disadvantage, your game plan to get inside isn't working. It's MMA. Use some kicks, use some takedowns. But he was content to have a boxing match, even after it was clear that he was going to lose that boxing match. Nevertheless, it was a great fight. It was a split decision for Wineland, but have to really question the judge who gave that to Pickett. I just think that was another. There were three inexplicable calls. There was the Holloway getting the split decision over Leonard Garcia. There was Brad Pickett winning one card, but that wasn't completely unconscionable that a judge thought that Pickett took 2 out of 3 rounds. Not crazy town. However, the judge that thought Melvin Guillard won all 3 rounds against Jamie Varner was completely crazy town. Jamie Varner absolutely won all 3 rounds on that fight, and 2 other judges saw it that way. And how you have one judge that sees every round on the card completely different than the other two judges on the card is just, frankly, it's beyond me, and I do not understand that. And that brings us to the main card. The card opened up with a bit of a stinker. The Derek Brunson coming in on 8 days' notice against Chris Lieben. Bad stylistic matchup for Lieben, as it turns out, and great strategy from Brunson. Just not a fan pleaser. Brunson was able to take Lieben down, keep him down, dominate on the ground, and then on the feet he would get in, he'd get a punch, and he'd dance away. He never let Lieben set. He definitely never made the mistake of brawling with the crippler. And, it's good to see Lieben back in the octagon after a year's suspension. Hope he's cleaned up his act and that the pain pills are a thing of the past. But Derek Brunson clearly won that fight. Dana White gave it a big thumbs down afterward and was complaining about Brunson looking up at the clock. Dude came in on 8 days' notice, Dana. Like, cut the kid some slack. I mean, this guy, God knows, he looked like he was in good shape. I'm sure he was ready as you can be. But 8 days' notice for a fight like this, for your octagon debut, man, cut the kid some slack. I thought he put in a credible performance, and I look forward to seeing him back. Then Yushin Okami versus Alan Belcher in a rematch of their, I believe it was 2007. They both made their octagon debut. It might have even been 2006, but in that fight, these many years ago, Okami's grappling was the difference, and once again, his grappling was a difference. Belcher hurt Okami badly with some punches, but he kept trying for kicks that Okami took advantage of, and worse, Belcher kept going for guillotines and dropping to his back and then losing it. There were a number of reverses and even times when Okami pulled Belcher down on top of him in the mount, Belcher wasn't able to capitalize. I'm not sure if Belcher was hurt or if something was off. He didn't look at his best, and Okami, frankly, he looked a little scared of Belcher after he ate some of those huge punches, which to me it's like incredible that you've got these two athletes. They came in, Okami was primarily a wrestler and a ground and pound guy. Belcher was primarily a Muay Thai guy 6 years ago, and it showed in their first fight. Grappler beat striker, no big news there. These many years later, when we've seen Alan Belcher grapple with the likes of Huzumar Palhares and defend himself and get the win, we've seen Yushin Okami learn to box, become a really good boxer with a vicious jab, and yet Belcher's striking has apparently improved just that much more, because it still looked like you had a striker in against a grappler. When they were on the feet, Belcher clearly had the advantage, and when they were on the ground, Okami clearly had the advantage there. Despite all of Belcher's advances, Okami's been working his grappling game this whole time and improved just as much, to stay just ahead of Belcher. Regardless, it wasn't the most fun fight, but it breathes new life into Yushin Okami in the middleweight division. After losing the title fight, losing to Tim Boetsch, he's now got 2 wins in a row. He's back. Alan Belcher, big setback for a guy who's been dogged by injuries, serious problems with his retinas, I believe knee problems. This is a guy who's shown flashes of real talent, who thinks he's a title contender in the middleweight division, but he just hasn't reached that level, and I'm afraid he might not at this point. That this might have been his high tide mark in the middleweight division of the UFC. The next fight, however, I think we do have a contender emerge. Costa Philippou came in as a substitute for his teammate Chris Weidman against Tim Boetsch. Boetsch was riding pretty high after a KO win over Yushin Okami and a decision win over Hector Lombard back-to-back. He was talking contender. Philippou just beat him down. It was viciousness at its finest. Boetsch hurt his hand, broke his right hand fairly early in the fight, and that might have been the key thing, because once he was hurt, and he couldn't rely on that power right hand anymore, Philippou really began to seize the advantage and just ground him down. It got him down. Once Philippou was on top of Boetsch, Boetsch was tired and hurt. It was vicious. It was relentless, and Philippou finally stopped at 2-11 into the third round. It's nice to see Philippou finally emerging. He's a talented boxer. He trains under Matt Serra in Long Island, and I think he might make some waves in the UFC middleweight division. But now we come to the real highlights. That Jim Miller versus Joe Lozon fight. Before the match, Miller had said things like, much respect to Joe Lozon, mad respect for the guy, I like him, but I want to make somebody look bad. And Miller came out with bad intentions and was just putting a beating on Lozon early on. He was landing elbows standing, punching him up standing, hurt him, had him cut up, multiple cuts to the head, cuts above the eye. Lozon was bleeding like a faucet, and Miller was, kept the pressure on, but he didn't get that finish. And Lozon came back, and man, what a fight. Lozon was flying for heel hooks with flying leg scissors and landing flying knees, and really showed the heart of a champion there, and just a fight that's going to stand the test of time. This is this is X-rated MMA because of the blood. I mean, it was heavy-duty gore. There were points when Miller was beating Lauzon, and he was lying in a puddle of blood, and they would move, and a new puddle of blood would form. There was a trail of puddles of blood across the octagon. It was brutal, but it also showed the heart of both contenders, and it's just amazing that Lauzon was able to come back from that early beating and very nearly put Miller out at some points later on in the fight, and ended the fight in a choke. Miller said there was no threat, that he was just taking a break, but you never know in those situations. Not that I doubt Miller. You just never know. But Lauzon, incredible performance, incredible heart, and for Miller, even more incredible. Just a great fight. I can't say enough about that. That really redeemed my faith in MMA and the UFC and fighting sports after a fairly lackluster card up to that point. But really the rhythm of the card, the way the Filipo Boch fight just got more and more brutal as it advanced, and even though there wasn't a ton of back and forth, it was a war of attrition that Filipo clearly won, and then the Miller-Lauzon fight was just a roller coaster. It was everything you'd ask for in a fight. Beautiful, beautiful display of sports at its finest, and heart and will and everything we look for from mixed martial arts. And then came the championship fight, and if anything could follow that fight, it was Cain Velasquez's performance over Junior Dos Santos. Early on, it looked like it might be a repeat. Cain was struggling to get takedowns. He was shooting in from far out. He was diving at ankles, and Dos Santos was sprawling away, dancing away, and early on was winning the striking. Then Cain hit him with a monster right hand to the jaw, and from then on, it was 4.5 rounds of beatdown. Cain was relentless. I could not believe he kept up that pace round after round, takedown after takedown, and ground and pound and ground and pound. And when he had Junior up against the fence, he was beating on him. When they were standing, he was beating on him. But Junior never gave up. It was amazing. Junior looked like Shane Carwin did when Junior Dos Santos demolished Shane Carwin. That look on his face, it looked like he had paid too much money for some bad collagen injections. His lips were horrifically swollen. Looked like DJ High Tech with Deontvort, one of his scary masks. I mean, it was ugly. And afterwards, Dana White thought maybe Dos Santos even broke his jaw. It turns out that wasn't the case, but man, it's unbelievable that he didn't break the jaw, because some of those punches, I think it was in the second round, the overhand right Cain landed, that literally had Dos Santos flying back on his feet. Incredible performance coming on the heels of their first fight, in which Dos Santos won with a one-punch knockout in under 70 seconds. Sets up an incredible rubber match at some point. I think Dos Santos, Cain's got some other challengers on the horizon. Alistair Overeem's out there if he gets past Bigfoot Silva. Daniel Cormier, who's a teammate of Cain, probably won't fight him, but he's out there. Josh Barnett might be coming to the UFC heavyweight division. He'd probably have quite a ways to go to earn a title shot if he ever does, but I do hope we see Barnett in the UFC heavyweight division. I think he deserves it. But nevertheless, Cain, it'll probably be a couple fights, and Dos Santos surely will need some serious time off to recover from injuries. So I don't expect an immediate rematch, but I look forward to it when it comes. I have no doubt that Dos Santos will fight his way back to the top, and that they'll have a rubber match for the ages to put on. This could be one of the best series in heavyweight history. I mean, you had Fedor Emelianenko versus Antonio Nogueira. Put on two great fights, but the second fight of their series was marred by a head injury that cut it short. So we never really got the full trilogy of Fedor Nogueira. Fedor and Krokop never only fought once. Nogueira Krokop fought twice. Nogueira Barnett had a great rivalry, but I think that Cain and Dos Santos could, should they put on a third fight that matches the other two, will be the greatest trilogy in heavyweight history, and it might establish who the greatest heavyweight of all time is. Maybe not all time, but definitely of this era. I think they've all got a long way to go to catch up with Fedor Emelianenko's accomplishments, and frankly, even Antonio Nogueira's accomplishments in the heavyweight division in the first part of the 21st century are still unmatched by anybody other than Fedor. And then there's Mark Coleman, Igor Vovchanchin, other guys that have made their mark in the heavyweight division over time, and I think Cain's probably behind all those cats in career accomplishments at this point, as is Dos Santos. But a few more years, a few more matches, and these guys are going to be looking at all-time great. I think they're definitely as good as anyone's ever been as a heavyweight in the UFC or in mixed martial arts. The exhibition they put on last night, that you cannot question the skill or heart of either man. It was incredible performance. I think as a fan, I can only be grateful. I was entertained as all hell. Great fight. I give the event overall, I'd probably give it 4 stars just because the undercard was so lackluster and long. Another was so lackluster. It was just a lot of fights that didn't come to any exciting resolution. You had a lot of grinding decisions. The Derek Brunson Chris Lehman fight definitely slowed the momentum of the card after a great Eddie Wineland Brad Pickett fight ended the FX broadcast on a high note. Although it did lack the dramatic conclusion that a lot of people like to see. Anyway, great card. I'm totally satisfied as a fan. It sets a great tone for 2013 for the UFC. Looking forward to seeing what Dana brings us next year. And, it was a great Christmas present. Happy holidays to everybody. I hope you had a good one. Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Ramadan, whatever you're celebrating. Much love, much respect. Looking forward to a great Happy New Year, everybody. We'll carry on next year. I'll be back with more tete-a-tetes with Eugene Robinson. Luke Thomas has promised this week he's going to do a tete-a-tete with me. So we'll be back. We'll talk about the business of the UFC and where things are going. Bellator on Spike is going to be a big deal. So big year in MMA coming up, and we'll be there at Bloody Elbow and MMA Nation on YouTube to give it all to you. And remember to subscribe to MMA Nation on YouTube, and you can see these things live. You never know when I'm going to have a Tourette's outburst and just go crazy and go total war machine and get banned for life. So if you're lucky, you might catch that here on Google Hangout. Anyway, I'll be back next week, and meanwhile, stay tuned to Bloody Elbow, MMA Fighting, and MMA Mania for all your MMA coverage. Take care.